So,
Okay,
would you
let's do it.
rather watch a horror movie or go to a dinner party and have to tell the aunties and uncles there that you're not going to be a doctor or an engineer?
I would much rather just be at home and watch a nice horror movie.
Yep. Hello, this is Chai Across Generations with Shankar and Nikhil. It is Halloween time, and so we are doing a Halloween themed episode today. Shankar is out this week, but I am joined by Mukhunth Raghavan here in the studio. Mukhunth, how are you?
Hey, Nikhil. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on. I am doing good. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm excited to have you on for the main fact that you're, into horror movies and horror films, and I think you are going to be a really fun interview here for Halloween. I'd love to tell the listeners a little bit about you before we dive in, if that's okay. Um, so Mukund is a well-traveled Tamilian who grew up in Chennai and Dubai before moving to the United States for his studies. He is currently getting his PhD in industrial and organizational psychology at the University of South Florida. So after having his filter coffee in the mornings, Mukund likes to volunteer at the nearby Big Cat Sanctuary, and he also really enjoys a good horror movie, which is why we wanted him here today to chat. The real horror, of course, is that he's not a bigger fan of chai, but I won't hold that against him. And if that's not enough, he's also one of many young people in our South Asian community who's navigating the maze of immigration and figuring out where his home is. So, Mukund, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thanks for that intro. I've loved horror for as long as I can remember. I can't really explain why or when that started, but it's something that is near and dear to my heart. So excited to dig into that and also hear from you. I'd love to hear what spooks you the most and why you generally avoid horror.
Yeah, we probably should get out of the way with the listeners or viewers that I am not a horror fan. Uh, Halloween as a holiday, I'm good with, but I do not seek out horror movies or horror content. So you and I are definitely on different ends of the spectrum here today.
Great,
Um,
great.
so I want to start before we get into the Halloween part of this. I wanted to start just getting to know you a little bit better because I think you're a really interesting person, and to have our audience get to know you. So I have a challenge for you. Um, I would like you to tell me two things about yourself, something fun, and then something unexpected that you'd want the audience to know about you above and beyond the intro that I shared.
Wow, I think you shared pretty much everything, but something fun. I do have a small cat that lives with me who's named Chapati after the
Chapati,
flatbread.
great name.
I don't know why I named her that. I just felt right, so I
I
went
love
with it.
it.
Something unexpected. Um I really enjoy traveling, and in between my childhood, I lived in Iran, Tehran, Iran, for a couple of years. That was really interesting, strange, exciting time. Very different from where I grew up in Dubai. But it was cool to have that experience, and I'm always attracted to novelty. So it was something that I was initially maybe not so open to because I was gonna miss my friends and all that. But I'm grateful to have had that experience and been able to travel.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I wanted to start with you is you have lived in so many different places in your life, from Asia all the way to America, and you've seen so many different things. And I wonder if those moves were scary or navigating all this movement has been a little bit scary. So, what's it been like for you to navigate all of these different worlds?
Yeah. Definitely scary. I think I have a very good memory of being on the flight from Dubai to Maryland. I was coming to the U.S. to study in college. I was going to Mississippi State University, so right in the middle of next to nowhere, Mississippi, in Starkville,
Hmm.
Mississippi. But my first stop was in Maryland because I had an aunt and uncle there, and I have a very vivid memory of looking outside the window and seeing the green pastures of the US sort of welcoming me as I'm about to land. And my first thought, and probably the scariest thought as I'm entering the American airspace was, oh no, I'm going to have to do all my laundry myself. And I didn't know how a dryer works because I was used to hanging up clothes.
I
But I was like,
see.
I have to figure this out. And for some reason, that just caused so much anxiety in that moment. Eventually, I figured it out, of course, but that was probably a very scary moment that has stayed with me since then.
Well, so I wanted to ask you about, your transition into working life, being a young professional outside of India.
Hmm.
And I mainly want to ask this because a lot of folks are trying to navigate the situation, right? Like leaving India for work. And as I
Hmm.
understand it, there's a tug, like, do I go back home? Do I not? I think there's a big portion
Hmm.
of our audience and just the South Asian community that are in your shoes. And we haven't really heard from this perspective on the podcast.
Right,
So I wanted to
right.
just ask you a little bit about what that experience is like for you.
Yeah, I think I'm in that place myself right now, just kind of thinking about should I, shouldn't I, and what is the right move, right next steps. I'm going to grab my cat and hold her because she is very excited. I am in that position currently, just thinking about what is the right move for me next. I'm open to going back to Dubai or going to India and having that experience as a new experience. I think it's tough. It's really tough. It really depends on what you're trying to prioritize. Going back home would mean that I'd be closer to family, an extended family, and be able to engage more with sort of the events, weddings, functions, whatever that's happening there. It takes a long time to get back home from here sometimes, so that could be an issue, especially if there's an emergency and you have to go back quickly. So all of those thoughts I'm considering pretty deeply, but at the same time also considering what my career would look like back at home, whether I'd have the same kind of opportunities. At the end of the day, I think it really comes down to what kind of opportunities are available and where your heart is. And at this time, I'm
Yeah,
a little ambivalent. I can see the pros for both options, and I'm sort of keeping my options open until something lands solidly.
right.
The U.S. is the land of opportunities, at least in my experience. Still, uh, there's a lot you can do here that may not be possible in other countries. One thing that I think would be good for everybody to consider, whether they are in my shoes or similar to you who've been living in the US, would be just sort of considering that folks that are immigrating or in this precarious position of being a student, especially near graduation, it's a time filled with uncertainties and change. There's a lot of change and there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of questions that come up. So showing that support to say, hey, I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I can relate to that feeling of uncertainty of not knowing what the next
Mm,
steps are, or saying, "Hey, I can help you figure out some of the next steps. Here are some connections, some networking opportunities." Those are always helpful, and it's always helpful to just be there for that person. If you're an immigrant yourself, I think it's really important to really learn what the process looks like and be educated on how it works, and at the same time being open with the opportunities that you are going after. I think that's really important to know because it's not useful for you or for the employer if you're not clear about your situation or about the needs, especially in terms of sponsorship. There are a lot of companies that maybe don't offer that for a particular role. Knowing that ahead of time is probably useful than
mm,
getting through to the point where you almost have the offer and they say, oh, we don't do sponsorship. That happens all the time. We hear those horror stories often. I've been on the receiving end of that myself. So, just being aware, being educated on that is always good. And
yeah.
reaching out, that's something that I struggle with often. Reaching out to the network, I think that's really important. And
Mm,
making it clear what you're looking for and what your needs are and where you are at the moment. And helping other people meet you where you are. Because sometimes they
mm,
might not even know what it is you need.
yeah.
So making that clear without expecting them to always just kind of know, I think those are all important points. How does that sit with you in your experience, having met, I guess, having met folks in both the professional world and among friends?
Yeah, it does resonate. I think those are a lot of good points. I think sometimes we're not attuned to the amount of change and the shifting sands of other people's lives. Shankar
Right,
talks about
right,
that all the time, right? He talks about
right.
how the pace of change is increasing, especially if you look at someone in the older generations. But even in our generation, for
Hmm.
someone like you who's had to navigate different environments, your life has changed so many
Mm-hmm.
times over, and in a way that mine hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I like your point about finding some commonalities even with different life experiences.
Right.
I think
Right.
what's harder for me to understand and where I need to remind myself is just the how daunting the immigration piece can be. Like, you have to get the visa. You have to kind of
Mm-hmm.
navigate between both governments. There's a limited number of slots. You have to think about the lottery, right? Because not everyone gets a visa that's wanting one. How does it tie
Mm-hmm.
into your work authorization? There's so many elements that
Right. Right.
were
Right.
hidden to me until I met people and professionals who were in your shoes, and I only
Right.
then was I able to appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you bring up an important point there. There are other people who have gone through this, and I think it's important to remember that,
Mm,
and try to connect with those folks who might be able to give you that insight, having had the experience and having gone through the uncertainty and then found some success at the end can also help you retain that hope, I guess.
right. Yeah, and Shankar has spoken about his experience with immigration as someone who's in a generation above
Right.
ours. So
Right.
we'll link those in the show notes too for folks who want to learn
Right.
more. But I did want to get your
Hmm.
perspective as someone from a younger generation, kind of navigating this in real time. And I appreciate you
Right.
sharing
Right.
that in this community.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I found a lot of support from that episode too. And it was
Yeah.
also interesting to listen to his experience from a few years ago, um, where today maybe the connectivity and ability to chat or have a video call with people distanced by miles is a lot easier than it was back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. If you don't take my endorsement, take Mukun's to go and check out that episode with Shankar. Um, okay, so let's move from something that can be daunting to something downright scary in Halloween. Uh,
Let's do
Tell me
it.
a little bit. You're maybe the biggest horror fan that I know among the people that I like interact with on a semi regular basis. So, how did that start, and what do you make of Halloween?
I don't know how it started. I've always, as far as I can remember, I've enjoyed spooky things. I think it's also that kind of interest in the unknown and the unknowable has always fascinating me. I grew up watching a lot of movies on DVDs, and I
Mm,
would exhaust the DVD completely. I would watch all of the behind the scenes, the making of, the deleted scenes. And so I think at some level, when I watch a horror movie, I understand that it's just a movie, and for some reason, it doesn't really phase me.
okay,
But I would never watch a movie like Marley and Me. I think that would scare me a lot more than some ghost or something.
that
Um,
is
yeah,
interesting.
I yeah
Wow.
I've never watched Marley and Me. I know what happens in the end. I'm not gonna do spoilers, but there's no need for me to watch that film.
I was gonna say no spoilers for anyone who doesn't know about Marley and Me. It's a tearjerker.
Yeah,
So,
it's a tearjerker.
okay,
I would never put myself in that position to watch
yeah. So
that.
this is interesting for you. So maybe the big cat piece of this comes in here. Do
Uh
you want to
huh.
tell us a little bit about the cat sanctuary and like your involvement in it?
Sure. I volunteer every week or every other week at a big cat sanctuary here in Tampa. Um, and I've found a lot of meaning from that experience. I've been doing it for a year and a half now. I grew up wanting to work with animals, but somehow find myself in the psychology corporate world. But it's always been something that's in the back of my mind, wanting to give back in that way and get involved in the wildlife conservation. I learned that the sanctuary here is looking for volunteers, so I applied and got in, and I've been doing it since. It's been a really rewarding, amazing experience. I'm really attached to animals. I would love to at some point get full time into the wildlife conservation space. I don't know exactly how, if it's going to be physical working there or working with data on higher level kind of work. Not sure, but we'll see when I get to that years down the line.
Right.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's awesome. It's really, really special to be able to form a relationship with wild animals that I never thought that I would experience.
The reason I wanted to
Uh,
ask you about that is because if Marley and Me is kind of your horror story, I'm
yes.
guessing it's this love for animals and that being horror to you, right? To see something unsavory happening or something sad happening to animals.
Right, right. Yeah, I think we're slowly spoiling the end here, but definitely
I'm just saying
that's
there's some
that's where
sadness. There's just some sadness.
there's some sadness.
Like
I haven't watched
maybe
it. I don't really know what happens.
I
I
think
don't
I
know
read
what
it
happens.
I think I read it a long time ago. Maybe the dog just gets a tummy ache. We don't know. We don't know. We'll have
Yeah,
to watch
maybe
it to find
too
out.
much for me to bear. That.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want to put you through that. Um,
Yeah. No, but generally I avoid sad movies and things.
mm.
I think that's my horror is any kind of sort of sad
But to you,
or
so to you,
negative.
is a traditional horror movie not sad? Because so I don't watch horror like at all, and
Uh huh.
to me, the idea of like I don't know a slasher film where like all these five people end up dead at the end of it by
Uh huh.
some force. That's
Uh
sad.
huh.
No.
It's sad, but I think there's a little bit of like that's not real. It doesn't reflect reality in the way that I see it, I guess. Um, for some people it does, and I can totally see how that could be really scary. You might expect that could happen to you at any point. I think
Yeah.
I don't expect to ever experience that in my life, so it's
Right.
not as scary, and it's maybe a little exciting because wow, this is the only opportunity I'll get to experience a haunting.
Yeah.
So why don't I go through it? It's the same with going to like a haunted house. It doesn't phase me because I know these people are in costumes. This is one of the only moments I'll get to experience this kind of feeling or this environment.
Yeah.
So I'm okay going through it. But I guess with like something like Marley and Me or um, even movies with a lot of sort of like war kind of things or
Oh
really
yeah.
historically sad films, those affect me a lot more than
Interesting.
spooky things, spooky
Yeah.
movies. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I wanted to ask you about Halloween specifically and how you think about the holiday. Like, do you get excited for it given the horror theme, or what's your relation to it?
Yeah, I love Halloween. I love Halloween. I've always enjoyed Halloween. Growing up, Halloween wasn't a thing until maybe until I was like 10 to 13. That's
Hmm.
when Halloween started catching on in Dubai. We lived in an apartment, and I can remember one of the first times somebody rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, and there was like this kid in
Yeah.
a ghost costume, and she was aware that this was going to happen, but at the same time, she was like, "Oh God, what is this?" I particularly remember this one experience of this kid in like a zombie costume, and he looked really. It was like a really well done, immaculate costume with a lot of gore. But my mother didn't want to see it. She looked through the little peephole, and she was like, "Oh my God, here!" And then she called me to give the candy out, but she was like,
Well,
"I don't want to open the door to this." What about you? Do you enjoy Halloween? I don't know. I know you don't like horror movies, but
yeah, I enjoy Halloween. I haven't been super active in it recently, but growing up, I would trick or treat. I grew up in
mm,
the States, and I
okay,
was usually a Power Ranger growing up. That was my costume of
okay,
choice.
okay, nice.
I've dressed up many a time as a Indian cricket player, and I just put on my cricket jersey.
Okay,
That may or may not be
nice.
what I did last year for Halloween. But so it's a quick, easy costume. I don't enjoy the scary part of it, but I do enjoy the connectivity
Okay.
and the idea of like magic or mystery.
I'm curious now, what is it about the scary part of both Halloween and the horror that gets to you? I know I talk
Yeah,
about like the reality part of it for me, but I'm curious what scares you, what scares people about horror
yeah.
movies, about Halloween.
And here I thought I was the interviewer, but you're putting the microscope on me. So let's see. What scares
I'm
me
just
about
curious.
what are my deepest, darkest fears? Let's see. I think I think what you said about realistic horror resonates with me. Like the fact to you that a
Uh-huh.
real movie, a war movie, or Marley and Me, like is real and seeing sadness affects you. I think
Uh-huh.
similarly for me, even if it's horror, even if it's unrealistic, that still
Mm-hmm.
feels like real life to me. And so
I see it.
seeing the same principle applies, I guess is what I'm saying in terms of
Right,
like
right.
sad things happening to real people. So yeah, I think that's why I don't watch it. Do you remember like there was a movie called The Nun years ago, and um,
Yes, yeah.
they played the trailer of The Nun in theaters, and they showed like a minute of the movie,
Uh-huh.
and I watched that trailer. It was actually okay. I got through it fine, but it
Uh-huh.
reaffirmed to me that I probably don't want to watch horror movies. I'm not into jump scares. Like, there's plenty of stuff in life that are scary on their own, right?
Right,
Why am I going to
right,
spend more
right,
time to be scared?
right. Yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah, that's what comes to me. But I did want to ask you about this. Um, we have to chat about this movie called Chandramukhi, which,
Yes.
for those who may not be aware, Chandramukhi is a Tamil horror movie back in 2005 when it was released. To me, I see it as like the initial horror movie in Tamil cinema, although that may or may not be true, and you can probably correct me. Uh, it's with Rajnikant and Jyotika and Prabhu, I think, and it's a really good horror movie. It scared the bejesus out of me, uh,
Wow. Okay.
and we can get into why. But I guess I just wanted to ask you, as a Indian, a Tamilian, and a horror fan, is Chandramukhi the scariest Tamil horror movie that you've seen?
I love Chandramukhi. I can almost quote the dialogues. I've watched it so many times. The first time I watched it, I was returning from a Tom Cruise film, having watched it in the cinema, and my mother and aunt were watching Chandramukhi on TV at home, and they had the lights off. And as my dad and my uncle were, as we were walking in and opening the door, it was a scene where Chandramukhi comes onto the screen and towards the climax, and you
The
just zoom in
eyes,
on her face,
the
and she's
eyes,
like,
yeah,
Rara.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
That was the scene that we walked into, and everybody jumped because they didn't expect us to open the door at that time. We didn't expect to see this on the TV as soon as we opened the door. So that's my first memory of Chandramukhi. But I didn't know it was horror. I thought it was comedy, honestly,
no,
because of Vadivel.
oh, that's true, that's true. But he's like, the first part is funny, right? The first part of the movie is funny.
First
The
part
whole
is funny,
Mapu,
definitely.
all the Mapu stuff is great, but then
Yeah,
he gets
yeah.
into, yeah, then it gets pretty scary. But I see your point.
But yeah, I mean, I love that movie. I loved it. I've watched it so many times. There are some really great horror movies in Tamil if you're ever interested, or if any of your listeners are interested. Like Pizza with Vijay Sethupathi, really
Hmm.
great. 13B with R. Madhavan, that's a really good one too. And then there's another one, Demonte Colony,
Hmm.
that came out relatively recently. I think maybe 2015, something like that. That one is really scary, actually.
And I also want to call out, from what I understand, a lot of great horror movies out there in Hindi cinema, in other
Hmm.
local Indian cinema industries.
Yeah.
And even a friend was recently telling me about a Bangladeshi horror film called Boshari
Hmm.
that came out, I think, last year, maybe. It was, I believe, nominated up for an Oscar, maybe won an Oscar. And
Hmm.
I think I
Okay.
heard that like Jordan Peele or someone was also, and Riz Ahmed were producing it. Um,
Oh wow. Okay.
Something like that. So I will pass you the link because I think you might be interested. It's actually only 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's actually only 20 minutes long, and I think it might be on YouTube. Um, but
Okay.
when I heard about it, I was like, I need to pass that on to you. Um,
Yes.
I wanted to play a game with you. Um,
Okay.
it's called South Asian Would You Rather. I'm going to
Okay.
pitch you two alternatives, two scary alternatives, and you got to pick which one you'd rather do. Um,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
would you
Let's do it.
rather watch a horror movie or go to a dinner party and have to tell the aunties and uncles there that you're not going to be a doctor or an engineer?
I've done both, but I don't know if I want to really get into the why. Why don't you want to be a doctor engineer? I would much rather just be at home and watch a nice horror movie.
Yep. I think,
Definitely.
yeah, that's a good pick. A lot of
Yes. Yeah.
explanations.
I. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I might pick talking to the aunties and uncles, but that's just because I don't like horror
Oh, really?
movies. But it's close. It's kind of close. I mean, it depends on the horror movie, maybe, but uh,
Okay. So you would go with that, the horror of dealing with those interactions.
I think so. I can handle that.
Then.
I know I might
Okay.
just get some disappointed looks or some judgment
Uh.
versus jump
Uh.
scares from the nun.
That's fair. That's fair. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay, second one. Would you rather volunteer
Okay.
with big cats or go back to India and have every family member ask if you remember them by name?
Oh man. Oh man. I would definitely volunteer with big cats. I would get as close to them as possible. because yeah, I mean, I think I know most relatives' names, but there's going to be a lot of them that are like, oh, I met you when you were the size of my palm. I'm like,
Yep.
I have no memory from from those days.
Right.
So definitely not. What about you? Would you join me on a big cat day or?
If you were doing it, I would go with you on a big cat day.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
feel like you know what you're doing, and I could learn from you. But if if it was just me, I would go back to India and have every family member ask if I can remember their name, which I've had
Would you
happen.
be successful?
No, I would not. And I'll be honest, I have been called out for it in the past where sometimes, someone will say, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I'll say, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And they'll say, "Oh, cool. What's my name?" And I'll say, "Oh," and then I will say like, "Oh, I remember kind of how we're related." And then we'll go from there. So it's okay,
Right.
but it is kind of scary to be in that situation.
Right. Right. It's almost like a test.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
It's good that
people.
we can just drop in.
Yeah.
It is a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible to remember everyone's name, just to be clear. Like there's
Right.
way too many
Right.
people, but uh
Right.
all right, number
It's good that
3.
we can just drop in an uncle or auntie here and there and
Exactly,
like
that's
fill in those
true.
gaps.
That's true. Yeah, or an Anna or
So
something.
and so's brother.
Right. Last one for you. Would you
Okay.
rather stay home alone on Friday the 13th or
Okay.
host someone and not have any chai or coffee to give them?
Oh man, the second one is a nightmare.
It's
Definitely. I don't
brutal.
know if I can. It's brutal. I don't know
Yeah,
if
like
I
what do
could
you do?
do
You give
that.
him milk? You warm up milk?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you would do. I would feel really guilty that I
Yeah.
wouldn't have any. You think at least it's chia chai for me,
Mhm.
but usually I have some coffee to offer.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I would definitely stay home on the Friday 13th because I would be too embarrassed to have somebody over and not have at least coffee or chai to offer them. Definitely, definitely. That's I think an easy one. What about you?
Yeah, definitely stay home alone on Friday the 13th. I don't find it that
Yeah.
scary. I mean, but
Okay.
not having chai or coffee available when
Uh-huh.
some relatives come by or friends, that's
Uh-huh.
like an emergency in some ways, right? Um,
Yeah.
and you just
Yeah.
have to figure it out from there. Try to give them other snacks or have another drink available that'll show them that you care.
Right. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I think that's an easy one. Easy choice for both of
Yeah.
us.
Okay. Well, thank you for playing that game.
Yeah.
Any would you rather's that you have?
Yeah. For you, definitely. I have a couple.
Okay.
Would you rather would you rather watch a horror film in a theater by yourself at night
Oof.
or have to go home and learn every single family member's name one by one and be tested if you remember it every year that you visit?
The second, for sure. I would rather go to India and have to learn the names and be tested every year. I can memorize things. I don't know if I want to be sitting in a horror movie, let's say The Nun, by myself. No, thanks. Wait, for how many years though? Forever?
Let's until you remember, I guess.
I'll
Until
still
it's
take that one. I'll take it if it takes me like the next 20 years.
okay, okay, okay. I have another one. Would you rather witness an exorcism
Gosh. Okay. I think I know my answer, but go ahead.
or travel through a trek on your own at nighttime?
What type of trek are we talking?
Just a wilderness trek. You don't know what's out
Oh.
there.
Hmm. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I might take the exorcism.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Okay.
I mean, you never know. There might be big animals. I won't say big cats, but there might be big animals out on the wilderness.
Right.
And if it's just
Right.
me, that's scary. What would you say to those two?
I would take that too. I would take the exorcism as well. I think I'm imagining maybe a stadium. I'm kind of protected. I'm like
Yeah,
watching this event
exactly.
rather than like you said, like wild animals or inclement weather,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to handle that.
It's funny with these would you rather's others because we picture like the nicest version of them at Exorcism, but we're like
Right.
in the arena somewhere in the back, right? And not like you're right face to
Right.
face this person. So I do appreciate that we try to make it nicer.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, thank you for indulging me in a game of Would You Rather.
sure. Sure.
And we can see the clear divide between you and me in terms of our horror preferences. um, I wanted to wrap up with just a couple questions, and we asked this to many of our guests. The first one, this is a podcast about different generations. What's the biggest
Mhm.
thing you've learned from another generation?
Wow, it's a big question. I'm grateful to have had a lot of and continue to have a lot of mentors from various generations. I have learned a lot. I think one of the things that I've learned is keeping calm, I guess, especially in the face of uncertainty and change, and focusing on what you can do to be present in the moment. It's pretty difficult for me to be present. Sometimes I'm often
Mm,
looking either into the future or ruminating about the past. But bringing my attention back into the present, that's been a teaching that has been passed down to me from many people from older generations, parents, grandparents, coaches, faculty. So definitely that's a big learning that I'm still trying to internalize, still trying to be good at centering myself in the moment. Uh,
yeah, I like
what
that.
about you?
It's a beautiful lesson. Oh, I think similar. I think it's around perspective. The perspective that older folks have
Mm,
on what they're going through, the ability to maintain calm and composure, and to just
right,
say, you know what, I'll figure this out. I've seen
right.
that with my parents. I've seen that with mentors and friends who are older, and it is inspiring. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's always fun to learn a little bit about how folks learn from other generations. As a thank you, we would love to donate to a nonprofit of your choice, um, to show some gratitude for coming on the show today. So, which nonprofit would you pick?
Yeah, let's say Turpentine Wildlife Creek. That's where the big cats and the small cats from Big Cat Rescue in Tampa are moving to. It's a huge operation, and they do have full time staff that are paid. But apart from that, it's a really big operation to take care of these cats. And the reason that these cats are even being taken care of by humans in this way in a sanctuary is because that they were either bred for captivity or they were held as circus animals,
Hmm.
or as pets, or for some reason they were held for human entertainment, and not left to be in the wild, which is where they should belong.
Mm-hmm.
I see these cats being fed daily buckets of meat, 10 pounds of meat per tiger, for example. And it's a very unnatural environment for both the human in that situation and the cat.
Hmm.
Unnatural, unnecessary. The only reason it's necessary is because there are so many cats that were totally raised in captivity. It's very difficult to release them back into the wild. So sanctuaries like this provide some space, some calm, and time for them to live out the rest of their lives. Um, Turpentine Creek does a really fantastic job of looking after their animals, and they don't have just cats; they also have bears and other animals.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciate you asking. I think this would be really helpful for
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely. And then
Right.
finally, anything else you want to say as we're wrapping up? Some people like to share how folks can get in touch with them or follow them, or just any closing thoughts on the show.
I really love this show. I really love what you and Shankar are doing. It's amazing to be able to tune in every week. I've been a long time listener, and I think I've listened to almost every episode so far. It's great the level of learnings that I get from the show. I really enjoy the communication that you and Shankar have, the back and forth, and the way that you're able to connect with each other and sort of play those thoughts back. a lot of both your experiences as well as Shankar's experiences resonate with me a lot and have helped me navigate many challenges in my life. So, first of all, thank you for doing this. This is really amazing. I think it's helpful to me. I'm sure it's helpful to a lot of other people as well. Thanks for having me on. I hope this was an interesting episode for you.
Yeah,
If folks want to get connected, LinkedIn is the best way. I am not really on social media. Mukhunth Raghavan. If you search that, you should find it.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
But apart from that, yeah, thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed this conversation, as always, Nikhil.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been fun digging into horror and movies.
Yeah. No, thank you, Mukund. Thank you for coming on and for all of the kind words about the podcast. We do this podcast to share interesting ideas, stories, experiences, in the hope that folks won't feel as alone, or folks maybe have different ideas for how they want to approach their lives, especially in our South Asian community. And I think you've added so many valuable perspectives today between the um, your immigration story and the different places you've been to, and your love of risk seeking and horror, your love for animals, right? All of those things have kind of shown through. So thank you for adding another voice in this rich
Absolutely.
community.
Absolutely.
Um, Plenty for us to learn on, and thank you for playing that fun game with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode. You can follow us and give us a like and subscribe on any of the platforms where you can find our podcast. That includes Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're also on YouTube, so you can watch this conversation or future conversations on YouTube. Please give that a look as well. Um, and, you know, if you can like, subscribe, that really helps other folks find our show, and also gives us a little bit of positive momentum heading forward. So thank you all. I hope you all have a wonderful Halloween and a wonderful time. And we'll see you all next time.